A shipwreck in the Greek islands. Hundreds of people fight for survival in a swirling storm. With their lives on the line, some people become heroes.
Don't let go!
Others do whatever it takes to stay alive.
Keep her away! She'll kill us both!
Investigators uncover an extraordinary chain of events. Small mistakes which have deadly consequences.
Mayday! Mayday! We're doing 90 miles an hour! Out of control!
Take a life jacket!
Where's the Coast Guard?
Don't let go!
A passenger ferry pushes its way through a storm.
What is that?
Within sight of land, this Greek island's ferry is sinking in high winds and stormy seas.
There was a hole, and it was going to sink, and it was going to sink fast.
A huge rescue operation kicks in. Rescuers must risk their own lives.
I never want to be in that situation ever again because it was terrifying.
But I had enough time to think, okay, well, this is the part where I die.
It was like a catastrophe. It was as if it was coming the end of the world for this island.
For the people of Greece, it's a national disaster, the worst of its kind in 30 years. Discovering why it happened will take months of detective work and raise this question: how safe are the ships we sail on? The Greek capital, Athens. This great metropolis has a 3,000-year history. A history built around the city's easy access to the Mediterranean. The harbor district of Athens is called Piraeus. Ferry boats ply back and forth between here and the more than 200 islands scattered throughout the Aegean Sea. For island hoppers, this is where the adventure begins.
It's here somewhere. It has to be.
Mayday today would be good.
I'm hurrying. Are you sure you don't got
Tuesday, September the 26th, 2000. Christine Shannon and Heidi Hart from Seattle are close friends. They've bought tickets for a ferry ride to the island of Paros, 166 kilometers to the southeast.
Express Samina?
Express sounds good. How long is it?
Christine's 32 and teaches preschool. Heidi's 26 and just graduated from college. She wants to go into business management. It's been a crazy kind of day. They'd planned on going to the island of Santorini, further south.
I have it. Okay, let's go.
We have to hurry.
Now I have the tickets. Let's go.
We'd been enjoying Athens the night before a little too much, and we overslept and missed our Santorini boat.
I had never heard of Paros. I even asked them, well, show me on a map where the island is, and then I said, never mind, it doesn't matter, let's just go. It's the next boat, let's go somewhere. So it was a fluke that we were on that boat.
Here's where chance is steering them. It could be a whole lot worse. If you dream of a Greek getaway, Paros is just what the guidebooks promise. Life is laid back, and the backdrop is enchanting. Around 12,000 people live on Paros year-round. In tourist season, add to that 100,000 visitors. Ferries from Athens head for the harbor in the main town, Perikia. There's constant traffic back and forth to the mainland. As one boat's leaving, another one shows up, bringing hundreds more eager visitors. Christine and Heidi are among 472 passengers who board the Samina today. As they get ready to embark, one thing becomes clear. Some of the boats on the island's run are modern, newly built. But the Samina comes from a different era. She's been crisscrossing the Mediterranean since 1966. The Samina was launched before these two were born. And though they don't realize it, Greek safety laws say that in little over a year, the Samina will be pulled out of service and sent to the scrapyard.
I made a few jokes to Christine about the lifeboats don't look very safe if we get into trouble out here. I said, we'll be screwed.
And I said, well, there's no icebergs in the Aegean, so we should be okay.
The Samina can carry more than 1,000 passengers, along with her 61 crew. So today, the ship's less than half full. Katrina Stark and her cousin Sarah Davis, both from New Zealand, are backpacking. Like Heidi and Christine, they're literally sailing into the unknown.
We had no plans. We went to get on the very first ferry that was leaving, going wherever it was going to take us, and that happened to be first stop Paros.
At 7:15, 2 hours into the journey, the sun is setting. There are still 3 hours to kill before the Samina arrives. The sports fans on board, passengers and crew, know just how they'd like to spend the time. There's a major soccer game playing live on TV. Athens' star side Panathinaikos are up against their German rivals, Hamburg.
The reception wasn't very good, and so they had various staff come along trying to fix the TV, and everyone was putting suggestions to how to fix the TV, and it seemed to be quite important to everybody on board that they get to see this game.
At 8 p.m., the Samina passes the island of Kithnos. They're on schedule to reach Paros at around 10:15. The wind is rising, the sea is growing rougher, but these northerly winds, known as the Meltemi, are frequent at this time of year. The Samina has weathered conditions much worse than this over the past 3 decades.
I'm gonna take a nap.
Heidi and Christine are the only people left outside. They think their tickets don't allow them to go in.
Wake me when we're there.
I said, we have third-class tickets. We have to stay out on the deck. It's going to be a cold, wet, terrible night. But I didn't even think to go downstairs where most of the people on the boat were.
For the crew of the Samina, the nighttime journey is routine. Hazards such as reefs and rocks are all clearly marked on their charts. Many have warning lights. 2 jagged outcrops rise from the sea within sight of the main harbor on Paros, Perikia Bay. Known as the Portes, or the Gates, they lie 5.5 kilometers from the town. For every mariner sailing these waters, the Gates of Paros are a familiar landmark. They're welcoming, but dangerous too. The rocks rise 25 meters out of the sea. Every passing ship must give them a wide clearance. At night, a beacon light on the taller of the 2 rocks sends a clear warning to sailors. Stray too close to the Gates of Paros, and disaster will follow. They're still 2 hours away. But they're sailing into a growing storm. Despite the weather, Christine and Heidi are still out in the open.
Had I known we could go to any other part of the boat at that point in time, I would have. But I didn't know, and actually being in that part of the boat, I think, was very fortuitous for us because we were able to be aware of what was going on later.
Being out on the deck will help save their lives. Soon, everyone aboard will be fighting for survival. On the evening of September the 26th, 2000, The passenger ferry Express Samina leaves Athens harbor Piraeus, heading southeast. She's making for the island of Paros, 5 hours away in the Aegean Sea. As the sun sets, the weather deteriorates until by nightfall the ship is being buffeted by a northerly gale. But the crew are used to such conditions. Their ship is big enough, tough enough to survive far worse. The Samina is 115 meters long, more than a soccer field, and 18 meters wide. Passengers are widely dispersed. Heidi and Christine are out on the open deck. Katrina and Sarah are inside the main passenger lounge. The nerve center is here, the engine room. It's below the waterline, but is protected by a series of watertight doors. The crew need to move about, but the ship is safe so long as they lock the doors tight behind them. To reduce the rolling effect of the waves, the ship also has a stabilizing system, like small wings that extend out into the water. It's still a bumpy ride, but it doesn't stop passengers moving about when they want to.
As we got further away and night began to fall, the seas got rougher and it became stormy until it got to the point where you couldn't even walk on board. You had to kind of stumble sideways. People were kind of laughing. It was kind of funny at the time.
Being from a place where we ride ferries quite often, it wasn't really a concern to us at the time, but it was pretty rough out there.
It's 10 p.m. The wind has now risen to nearly 50 kilometers an hour. Waves are cresting 2 meters high. Despite the gale, visibility is good. Those are the lights of Paros. The Samina's on time and still pushing forward at 33 kilometers an hour. Then suddenly, the ship lurches sharply to the left.
What's that? Oh,
The boat turned enough that it startled me awake, and I woke up and was kind of dazed a little bit.
You can't just park a boat like you're parking a car, and so I thought it was odd that I felt this G-force of the boat turning.
Christine said, "Hey, there's lights. I see shore. We must be getting pretty close to docking."
The lights of Parykia, even car headlights, are clearly visible just 5.5 kilometers away. But then another light cuts through the darkness.
This rock just comes out of nowhere, just out of the black night. And I'll never forget what it looks like in my mind. It was, you know, this brown, kind of craggly, sandish looking rock that had lights on top of it shining down so it illuminated it. And it made it look like a movie set. The side of the boat scraped along the side. I could have walked over and touched it. And you could hear down in the lower decks of the boat that the metal was just ripping apart.
The unthinkable has happened. The Samina has crashed against the Gates of Paros. 1 million kilos of ship grind against the rocks.
It was the worst sound, and it was the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life. It sounded like fingernails on a chalkboard, just God's fingernail on the biggest chalkboard in the world.
There was a hole, and it was gonna sink, and it was gonna sink fast.
The shockwave reverberates through the ship.
Suddenly there was a big lurch to the right side of the boat, and people who were standing up got thrown off their feet. Everything in the bar smashed. I looked out the window and there were 2 large rocks went past that looked white, lit up by the light inside the ship.
I don't know what that was. Oh, man, that just doesn't sound good, you know?
In a situation like this, the time frame is so hard to put back together. But it seemed like maybe a minute or two until the boat started to noticeably lilt to the side and tip. And that's kind of when the chaos started.
Get out of this place.
Am I supposed to run to that? Get off this ship!
Lots of people were crying, lots of people were praying, holding on to each other, yelling. There was no alarm or siren, there was no one to tell us what we were supposed to do.
We need to get off this boat and we need to leave right now.
We don't have to panic.
Christine said to me, the Titanic took hours to sink. And I said, we don't have that much time.
We don't have hours, Christine. We need to leave now.
Okay.
In my mind, I thought, this boat's gonna sink and we're all gonna die.
All these people trying to get life jackets. Being taller, I was able to reach over the heads of most people who were trying to get hold of life jackets and grab two.
The Samina has 61 crew members, but where are they? Passengers must fend for themselves.
So I yelled to Christine, come here, I think I found life vest.
Hey, just open up. Just take it out.
At this point, people were starting to run past us. And I was saying, here, take these, and throwing them out, and people were just panicking.
Within minutes of the collision, the ship's lights go out. Passengers are plunged into darkness until emergency generators kick in.
And then the first flare went off. This eerie red glow coming down over the ferry gave it a whole nother feeling of just terror that we're out in the night, in the dark, and the ferry's gonna sink.
At the harbour, port officials are now aware of the developing crisis. Port Authority Vice Commander Dimitrios Malamas starts to organize a rescue. He needs all available boats right now.
What vessels do we have in the area?
Alexis Bisbas runs a yacht charter business in Pareikia.
The first I heard of the disaster was a phone call that I got from the port police at about 10:15. Can I get out there with my boat as quickly as possible just to help with whatever might be necessary? And there was no way that we had any idea that it was going to be a disaster of that magnitude.
Paros has a medical center equipped for the islanders' basic needs, not a major disaster. Dr. John Polyzoides was an ER surgeon for 35 years. Though retired, he helps run the center.
We saw the ship was going down, and there were a lot of boats and lights and so on. I personally did not expect anything tragic to come out of that because we were so close also to the harbor.
Aboard the Samina, many of the 472 passengers are in a state of sheer terror.
It was chaos. It was people not knowing what to do and waiting for a captain or a crew to help us.
There was a woman who went through the door just before us, and she, as soon as she got out onto the deck, she climbed over the railings and just jumped off, like didn't look back or didn't say anything to anybody, and just climbed over and threw herself off into the water.
There was people holding children over the railings, wanting to throw them down to people in the water. It was quite a terrible scene.
The wind hampers efforts to abandon ship.
They were releasing inflatable life rafts. They weren't attached to the ship, so as soon as it was released, it was in a big storm, it would get picked up by the wind as soon as it was inflated, and they were just blowing halfway to Athens.
The rafts blow beyond the reach of many passengers who've already leapt into the sea. In the confusion, Heidi Hart is knocked flying, striking her head.
I kept thinking, if I black out now, I'm done for. This boat's sinking. I have to stay conscious. I had this adrenaline rush, and there was, a feeling that I would call terror. I knew instantly this was going to be a fight for our lives.
There was some point in time where I literally felt myself leave my body and instincts kicked in.
Everybody was running to the rear of the boat, and Christine just looked at me and said,
"Go that way, to the front of the boat." And she said, "But nobody's up there." It was the darkest part of the boat. It was the highest part of the boat. She said, "Nobody's up there." I said, "I don't care, go."
And luckily for us, that's where we found a lifeboat hanging over the side of the ship.
Heidi and Christine have escaped the sinking ship, but they're still at the mercy of the storm.
When we jumped into the lifeboat, it wasn't orderly, here's your seat. It was jump. Where you land is where you are, and so we were just kind of all pig-piled in this lifeboat together.
The battle for survival takes an ugly turn. Each passenger must decide, help others or fend for themselves.
There was 5 or 6 men in the back of the boat, and they were fighting with each other. They were yelling at each other. As the ferry was sinking, they kept pointing at the ferry and fighting with each other. And then, you know, this is when I see the guy swimming up to the boat, and so I started getting ready. I'm thinking, okay, I need a rope. I gotta throw him something. He has no life vest on. The only thing you could see was his eyes and his nose coming out of the water, and he was just barely making it, swimming towards us.
Everybody else on the boat was yelling, "No, no, we can't take any more people on."
I've got you, don't worry! I've got you!
Now Heidi leaned over and grabbed this gentleman's hand, and I reached over and grabbed her by the waist, and she told me, "I'm not letting go," and I yelled to the other people, "She's not letting go."
He had taken off almost all of his clothes. He was wearing just his underwear. I mean, I'm not a very big person. I'm 5 feet tall. Just me trying to pull him in the boat wasn't gonna work.
The men in the lifeboat realize that Heidi won't let go and finally help haul the drowning man on board.
I don't know what they were thinking. They were panicking. So, I mean, who am I to judge what other people were thinking and doing? But there was a lot more that could have been done that night.
Of the 533 people who set out on the Samina, many are now in the sea. Others are still trapped on the vessel itself. The ship begins to roll over. If it goes down, dozens of people will be dragged down with it. The passenger ferry Express Samina has struck rocks near the island of Paros in the Aegean Sea. 533 passengers and crew face a battle to survive in high winds and stormy seas. Some people have managed to clamber into a lifeboat. Others have stayed with the ship and now fear it will sink beneath them.
At that stage, we were on the deck trying to figure out whether it was a good idea to jump overboard as well. But we were tilting further and further, and it was getting to the point where we didn't really have that choice anymore.
It's 10:50, 40 minutes after the collision.
Sarah! Are you looking at me?
As the Samina continues to roll, Katrina Stark has little choice. She hauls herself over the rail. The ship has turned completely on its side. Katrina is sitting on the hull. Should she try to swim for shore or wait for rescue?
While I was sitting there thinking about that, all of a sudden the ship just sank underneath us and sucked us down and everything around it. I don't know how much time we were under the water, but I had enough time to think, okay, well, this is the part where I die. This is the part where I drown. I kind of thought, well, okay, that's fine, and had enough time to be okay with that.
Just as we got there, we saw the ferry sinking, which was an extreme sight.
And to see this entire ship sink beneath the waves and to be gone and just leave us in our little lifeboat it was amazing. It was almost beautiful in a sad sort of way.
And then complete blackness, darkness, huge waves.
The Samina sinks 2.5 kilometers from the Gates of Paros. Even without its engines, wind, waves, and the ship's own momentum carry the Samina closer to the shore. The sea here is 38 meters deep. As the Samina goes down, huge bubbles of air escape from the ship, making the water less dense, making objects in the water sink more quickly. Katrina Stark sinks several meters before the buoyancy of her life jacket pulls her up again.
As suddenly as I had been sucked under, suddenly I popped out the top.
Her priority now is to find her cousin, Sarah. In the storm, she can't tell where she is.
The waves were so big that for 1 second it sounded like she was over there, and so I tried to swim that way, and then the next second it sounded like, oh, she's over there. I tried to swim that way.
Sarah! Sarah! I can hear you, but I can't see you! Sarah! Sarah!
Eventually I just said to her, okay, make sure that you get on a boat and get back to land, and I will see you back on shore.
At 11:15 p.m., Dr. Polyzoides receives his first casualty of the night, but something doesn't add up.
They brought a man on a stretcher. He was semi-conscious. And then we started working on him. He had hardly any blood pressure. And when we were resuscitating him, I realized that he was dry, which it meant that he didn't actually, he was not from the ship. Anyway, we carried on. Eventually we lost him. He died in our hands. And then people came and he said, you know who it was? And I said, no.
His patient isn't from the Samina, but the disaster still claims its first victim. The man is Dimitrios Malamas, who'd been helping organize the rescue. In the crisis, he'd suffered a heart attack. He was 40 years old.
So you can understand, even at this early stage, although we did not know the number of people that were going to lose, there was that sense of tragedy immediately from the very beginning.
A local shopkeeper, George Skandalis, grabs his video camera and captures these first raw images as survivors begin to appear.
As soon as we got close enough to shore, and when I saw this white cathedral with the blue dome top, that was when I finally knew we made it. We're gonna get to shore, we're gonna be alive.
I felt more alive than I've ever felt in my life. Giddy, almost giddy. And actually afterwards, one of the things that I had to come to terms with was that people died and I felt so alive.
One of the local fishing boats now appears, crowded with people who've been dragged from the sea. Local boat owner Alexis Bisbas is part of the rescue flotilla searching for survivors.
1 minute we were flying across the top of a wave, the next minute we were burying the bow of the boat into the previous wave. We had water coming across the decks. I've been sailing all my life. I've never had a situation like that. I never want to be in that situation ever again because it was terrifying.
He plucks 25 people from the sea in 3 trips out into the stormy waters.
One of the amazing things in these situations is the way that people behave. A young man we pulled out who was still carrying his portable stereo system. So the one hand's trying to grab hold of the boat and the other hand, as we realized, was being hampered by this stereo system that he still had in his other hand. One of them was an old lady who had tied to her life jacket her bag. As we were trying to drag her into the boat, we realized that something was stopping her, and I went to cut her free of this bag, and she said to us that if we did, we should throw her back because that was her entire life in this bag.
Many survivors are in a state of shock. All are cold, wet, and exhausted. Just a few hundred meters away, dozens of people are still in the water, trying to stay alive until they're spotted by a rescue boat. Katrina Stark and a fellow survivor, a total stranger, are now clinging desperately to a piece of wreckage.
My first surprise about being in the water was that it was warm. I was really expecting the water to be cold. They were big waves, and you just had to cling on tight to the piece of wreckage. Not too far away from us was an older Greek woman who couldn't swim. And she was panicking and was screaming and yelling, trying to get someone to come and save her. And the guy that I was with was saying she's going to want to come over to us, and if she grabs hold of us, she's going to drag us down.
Keep her away! She'll kill us both together!
She had kind of wild eyes, like she was clearly panicking. And a big wave came and washed over her, and she didn't come back up out of the water. She had drowned.
There are still some signs of hope. Some people have been pushed south by the wind. Miraculously avoiding being smashed onto the rocks, they've wound up on a sandy beach, the Bay of St. Irene. A life raft beaches in the same spot. They're safe now, but the terror these little children have gone through is hard to comprehend. More than 400 survivors have now wound up on the dockside. Many have suffered a terrifying ordeal in the water. They're rushed to the medical center, where Dr. Polyzoides has now assembled a team of 15 medics. Some doctors and nurses based on the island, others tourists who've come in to assist.
Between 11:30 and 12, the first drowned was brought in on a stretcher. And although I worked for 35 years as an accident surgeon, it was a horrible experience. And that was the beginning of the horrific feeling which I had that this is serious now.
At midnight, after an hour in the water, Katrina Stark is brought to shore.
We were the last people that they were able to bring up onto the boat. And they headed back for the harbour. And on the way, they stopped a couple of times to pick people up, but they would go to pick them up and realise that they were dead, and so they'd just leave them where they were.
Katrina doesn't know if her cousin made it.
Sarah? Katrina?
I was just never been so happy to see anybody in my whole life.
How did you get here?
And I just grabbed hold of her and wouldn't leave her side for a second.
So happy to see you. Oh, you are you okay? Are you keeping warm? Yeah.
It was terrifying. I mean, it's been 5 years since the accident, and I still have nightmares. I still think about it. It will still make me cry.
You guys have had quite a shock being in the water.
It was traumatic, and it was very scary, but it was also a singularly defining moment in my life where I was able to use all of the resources I had to survive.
I think we've got him. Pull, 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 pull.
I don't think I would have chosen not to live through this.
At midnight, more than 2 hours after the collision, the rescue operation is becoming more and more a search for bodies.
When you start seeing the bodies in the sea, somebody that I knew that an hour ago they were breathing, and suddenly they're dead, and it was very distressing. I mean, it took me a very long time to put it out of my mind. It was very difficult.
25 people are now confirmed dead. As victims continue to arrive, Dr. Polyzoides is overwhelmed.
Do I go to this room and try and save someone? Do I wait and see whether it's worth saving? And it was like a catastrophe. It was as if it was coming the end of the world to this island. So it was almost like you're seeing a movie that's not happening to you. Every half an hour, the number of bodies increased.
By 2:30 a.m., the number of dead reaches 60. There's no room for so many bodies in the medical center. The Church of St. Nicholas on the waterfront now becomes a temporary morgue. The search for people, alive or dead, continues right through the night. Very soon, investigators will begin to ask tough questions. Who's to blame for the sinking? Why did so many people have to die? The passenger ferry Express Samina has sunk in a storm in the Aegean Sea. Already 60 people are confirmed dead. Many more need medical treatment. Morning reveals the power of last night's storm. A lifeboat lies smashed to pieces on the rocks. Life rafts blew away, empty. A message board at the harborfront lists who's alive and who's still missing. Bodies will continue to wash up on the beaches for days to come. There aren't enough coffins on Paros. More arrive. Even the most experienced professionals are touched by the trauma.
I was so shaken by this that I didn't sleep for 2 nights, and on the 3rd night, where I went to sleep, I dreamt that my son was drowning.
Very quickly, the grief turns to anger. Where were the crew when the ship hit the rocks? Where were they when the passengers needed help? Rumors spread like wildfire and are picked up by the media. Were some members of the crew watching the soccer game on TV when they should have been steering the ship? The captain, 53-year-old Vasilis Giannakos, is held for questioning by the police. On Paros, the funerals begin. Here, a 4-year-old boy drowned with his father. Divers discover 10 bodies trapped inside the hull of the Samina. The last body is found floating 2 weeks after the sinking, 50 kilometers north of Paros. Altogether, 80 people have died, 75 passengers, 5 crew members. This is Greece's worst shipping disaster in more than 30 years, a national tragedy. In the bitter aftermath, the spotlight falls on the company which owned the Samina and its vice president, Pantelis Sphinias. He could face criminal charges, as well as multi-million-dollar compensation claims. 2 months after the sinking, police surround a body lying on the sidewalk outside company headquarters in Athens. Sphinias has jumped out of his 6th floor window, committing suicide. Maritime experts at the National Technical University of Athens begin an inquiry. Detailed testimony is gathered from 46 crew members, as well as 192 passengers. The Greek legal authorities want the university to give them a thorough explanation of what happened. Professor David Molyneux of the National Research Centre of Canada is one of the world's leading experts on ferry safety. He's studied the findings of the Greek investigators, who came up with a startling realization.
What they found at the inquiry defied some of the initial speculation concerning the age of the ship, and the accident, in fact, turned out to be caused by something completely different.
Testimony reveals each small but critical factor that together turn a routine ferry crossing into a national disaster. 3 hours into the journey, the crew switch on the ship's autopilot.
The autopilot is an electronic link between the compass and the rudder, correcting the rudder a little bit one way or the other to bring you back where you want to be.
Even on autopilot, a crew member should constantly monitor the ship's position.
It's bad practice to leave an autopilot unattended, particularly in bad weather, because the wind, the waves, and the current are all acting to drift the ship in one direction. And that kind of steady drift is not compensated for by the electronics in the autopilot.
As the weather grows worse, the crew deploy the ship's stabilizer system to make the ride more comfortable for the passengers. The stabilizer uses two small fins to counteract the roll of the ship. But something extraordinary has happened. Only the starboard, or right-hand stabilizer fin has extended.
Very unusual. Normally we'd expect both stabilizers to be working at any one time. With just one stabilizer, the ship is no longer symmetrical, so the flow around the ship is unbalanced, and as a result, the ship will tend to drift one way rather than go in a straight line.
With only the starboard stabilizer, the Samina is pulled slowly but surely to the right. It's a deadly malfunction. Captains aim to stay at least 740 meters left of the Gates of Paros. But when the Samina arrives, she's on collision course. A crew member makes a last-minute attempt to steer the ship to the left, but the ship can't turn quickly enough.
It was very unfortunate the ship got hold, but there was really no reason why the ship should have sank. The damage was within the range that you would normally expect a ship to survive.
The east face of the taller pinnacle is where the ship strikes, at 12 minutes past 10 p.m. There's a 6-meter lengthways gash, as long as a telephone pole, and 1 meter wide. But this hole is well above the waterline. No water should enter the ship. Moments later, a second impact. The stabilizer fin bends backwards. It stabs like a dagger through the ship's side.
Oh my God!
This 3-meter gash is below the waterline. Even worse, it's exactly alongside the engine room. The main generators are knocked out. Electrical power is cut throughout the ship. The investigating team orders divers to make a detailed survey of the wreck of the Samina. Inside, they discover the final piece of the puzzle. Even with 2 large holes, the ship could have been saved. One final error sealed the fate of the Samina. The passenger ferry Express Samina strikes rocks near the Greek island of Paros. With 2 gaping holes in her starboard side, she capsizes and sinks in 38 meters of water. Divers go down to survey the wreck and make a startling discovery. Like all large seagoing ships, the Samina is divided into separate compartments, sealed by watertight doors like this one. Safety laws insist they remain locked while the ship's at sea. On the Samina's last journey, some of the doors were open.
If you imagine in your house, every time you went through a door from the kitchen, you had to close it, lock it, move on to the living room, open that door, close it, lock it, and carry on. It really does slow down your everyday life. So there is a tendency sometimes to leave these doors open.
Because they're left open, water is no longer confined to the engine room. And now that the power is cut, the crew can't close the doors remotely. "29 of the crew are called back for a second grilling by investigators. This testimony provides an exact picture of the ship's last moments, data which is now built into a computer model. At 10:15, 3 minutes after the collision, the ship is listing only 5 degrees to the right. but filling fast through that hole in the engine room. By 10:25, she's listing 14 degrees. Now the 6-meter gash, which was above the waterline, is exposed to the sea. This is the point where the Samina and 80 of those on board are doomed. The ship can't withstand this degree of damage. The Samina is what's called a ro-ro ferry. It stands for roll on, roll off. This is a modern ro-ro ship. Vehicles simply reverse in through the stern doors and then drive out at their destination. It's a cost-effective design with a potentially fatal flaw. The worst shipping disasters in recent times have involved vessels designed this way. The Herald of Free Enterprise went down with the loss of 193 lives at Zeebrugge in Belgium in 1987. 850 were drowned aboard the ro-ro ferry Estonia in the Baltic Sea in 1994. Unlike a cruise ship or a cargo vessel, which are divided into many smaller compartments, the vehicle deck of a ro-ro ship is one large open area, highly vulnerable to rapid flooding.
Imagine comparing flooding an egg box with flooding just an empty cardboard shoebox. The shoebox would tend to fill up very, very quickly, whereas an egg box would tend to fill up each compartment at a time, and so the egg box would stay afloat, whereas the shoebox wouldn't.
This open space is especially vulnerable because it's so close to the waterline.
The car deck on a ro-ro ferry is low to make driving the vehicles on and off easy. As a result, you're relying on those watertight compartments to keep the ship afloat in the event of damage.
By 10:29, the Samina is listing 23 degrees. She's now tilting so much that it's impossible to launch more lifeboats. Only 3 of the 8 she carried got away. 3 minutes later, at 10:32, she's listing 33 degrees. At around 10:50, the ship turns completely on her side.
We know the exact time that the ship sank because the clock on the bridge was stopped at 2 minutes past 11.
Divers surveying the wreck make their most important discovery. Of the ship's 11 watertight doors, 9 were left open.
And the most important aspect of this accident was leaving the watertight doors open. As a result, the ship flooded, lost all its reserve of buoyancy, and eventually sank.
If the doors had been locked, despite the navigational error which put the ship on the rocks, despite the hole in the engine room, this would probably have been a survivable accident. The trial of ship's captain Vasilis Giannakos and 7 others began in May 2005, more than 4 years after the disaster. The sinking of the Samina led to safety improvements. Greece cut the maximum working life of passenger ferries from 35 to 30 years. The tragedy also helped speed the introduction of voyage recorders, like an airplane black box. They're now mandatory in all passenger ferries. Some good came out of bad. For the first time since those dramatic events, Katrina Stark has come back to Paros. It's an emotional return.
It was a pretty traumatic thing to go through, but it's quite a character-building experience, and I think it plays a large part in who I am today.
For their role in helping to save lives, Heidi Hart and Christine Shannon were given an award for heroism by the city of Seattle.
I understand my strength a lot more, and I can live freely without the restraints of being scared of what's unknown, because life is an unknown.
Even for a heroine, it's tough to look back.
Christine and I, we always say we were the lucky ones. We were in the right place at the right time, and that is the only thing I can think of why we made it and so many other people didn't. And it breaks my heart.
An enormous freight train is out of control, tearing through the Canadian Rockies. The crew does nothing to slow the train's terrifying speed.
Jack, are you there?
Charging the other way, a passenger train with more than 100 people on board.
Front end, Jack, come in. Oh my God. Mayday, Mayday! We're doing 90 miles an hour. Out of control.
Take a life jacket!
Where's the Coast Guard?
Don't let go!
It's one of the most spectacular train rides in the world. Every year, thousands of people take the slow and easy way through Canada's Rocky Mountains. Avoiding traffic, they take the train and leave the driving to somebody else. In late winter, 1986, a gentle trip through the Rockies will end tragically.
It was like a mini atom bomb. And all of a sudden it ignited. Woof.
I'm gonna help you. I can hear the women screaming, you know, to save her baby.
An investigation makes shocking discoveries about the Canadian railroad industry.
At that time, I didn't think that anything was wrong.
February the 8th, 1986. Spectacular northern lights dance across the sky over Edson, Alberta in Western Canada. Driving freight trains has been a lifelong dream for 48-year-old Canadian National Railways engineer Jack Hudson. But after 16 years on the job, he knows all too well that it can be a grueling career. Because Canadian freight trains travel such vast distances, up to 12 local crews may be used in the course of one cross-country journey. Hudson works a mountainous stretch of track through Alberta, running between his hometown of Jasper and Edson to the east. Like many trainmen, Hudson works a regular beat, driving over the same stretch of track, then turning around again with another train, day after day. At around 11 p.m. last night, Hudson got off the freight train from Jasper and spent the night here in the company bunkhouse at Edson. Now he's up again after just 3.5 hours of sleep, ready to return to Jasper. At the station, he's joined by his brakeman. Like Hudson, 25-year-old Mark Edwards lives in Jasper. And like Hudson, he hasn't slept very much.
Did you get some rest?
Not much. Got a touch of the flu. Could use a full night's sleep.
Hudson and Edwards will ride up front in the first engine. Hudson drives the train while Edwards keeps an eye on the brakes and pitches in if Hudson needs any help. Known to his fellow railmen as Smitty, 33-year-old Wayne Smith is Hudson's conductor. He's the last of the three-man crew in charge of the freight train this morning.
Smitty?
Smith rides in the caboose, the last car in the train. He acts as an extra set of eyes, making sure the men in the front end know what's going on behind them. The three men are long-time employees of Canadian National, or CN, Rail. And all of them have been up and down this length of track countless times before. The train they're riding today is enormous. CN train 413 is just under 2 kilometers long. The cars are filled with a collection of grain, metal pipes, and chemicals. It tips the scales at more than 11 million kilos. As the freighter rolls into Edson, it slows to a crawl, but doesn't stop. Getting it started again would take time, and the crew wants their trip to begin as soon as possible. Hudson and Edwards take the train on the fly, boarding it as it rolls slowly along. According to CN Rail's Code of Conduct, this is illegal, but it's something crews do routinely. With the caboose still nearly 2 kilometers away, Smith stands by the track to inspect the cargo as it crawls by. He makes sure there's nothing obviously wrong with the freight or the cars carrying it.
All set, Jack. Clear signal leaving Edson.
Clear signal leaving Edson.
Another part of Smith's job is to stay in touch with the front end of the train. He's supposed to make sure they're alert throughout the journey. Now, with the caboose pulling alongside the platform, Smith climbs aboard.
Okay, he's got the brakes off. You're good to go. See you later.
At 6:40 a.m., Hudson pushes the throttle. The freight train picks up speed as its 8,000 horsepower diesel engines open up. The CN freight train begins the long haul west to Jasper. The men are going home.
Dispatcher to 413.
Good morning, dispatcher.
Good morning, Jack.
But Hudson isn't sure exactly how long his train is, or precisely what he's carrying.
Dispatcher at Medicine Lodge here. I haven't had a chance yet.
Oh, that's, you got pretty well grain cars, eh?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. This should be the right length then. Okay, thanks.
As 413 roars west, a Via passenger train speeds east on the same track. Via Rail's Supercontinental Passenger Train number 4 is cruising toward Edmonton, Alberta. More than 100 passengers are enjoying the spectacular scenery as it cruises through the rugged Canadian Rockies. 36-year-old Jamie Haight is a car assembly operator. He's headed home to Ontario after a 2-week visit to his family in Vancouver.
It's a very, very small community that you're in close proximity with a lot of people very, very suddenly. And so there's a lot of people we got to meet and got to interact with. I remember there was a couple of ladies that we met over dinner. One was very, very pregnant.
While some passengers are still sleeping, Haight goes into the day coach to do some reading before breakfast. It's the 4th car in the train.
I remember this lady, and she had a little boy with her, about 3 years old or whatever. He was quite in awe, the little child was quite in awe of the scenery. So I sat down in it, and I lifted the shade a little bit so I could get some of the daylight coming in, and I started to read a pocket novel.
Several cars behind Haight is 61-year-old assistant conductor Herbert Timpey. An old hand on the Canadian passenger line, he's been riding this piece of track for 7 years.
I had to be the assistant conductor and look after the passengers on that train.
Next stop, Hinton.
The passenger train is pulling into Hinton. The freight train is just about to reach Hargwen Station, 20 kilometers east. Here, the rail line briefly splits into 2, so trains can pass each other. 413 will take the upper track, while the passenger train passes below it. As Hudson approaches the split in the tracks, traffic signal lights tell him to slow down.
Smitty, we've got an approach limited signal at Hargwen. Next station, Dalehurst, over.
Head end of 413, approach limited at Hargwin. Next station, Dalehurst. Out.
These are the last words these men will ever exchange. A dispatcher in Edmonton sets a switch, and 413 is forced onto the upper track. The Via passenger train arrives at Hinton Station at 8:20 a.m. On board, 64-year-old Martin Pedersen settles down to breakfast in the downstairs lounge of the Dome car. He's feeling rested after a good night's sleep. A former World War II fighter pilot, Pedersen has a lot of experience with locomotives. Over the course of the war, he blew up 36 enemy trains in France. The night before, Pedersen swapped war stories with another veteran he met on board. 61-year-old Kenneth Cuttle is a former Royal Marine.
It was February. I was going to Edmonton to look for another job.
Like Pedersen, Cuttle also fought behind enemy lines in World War II. Cuttle and Pedersen are survivors.
Let's go upstairs to the Dome car, have a look around, see what's happening. The train was pretty comfortable, you know, not many people on board. I said, let's go up to the Dome car because it was just coming light and we see lots of things which you might not get another chance to see. We were in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains.
There are now 115 people on board. But the train will never make it to Edmonton. And the passengers and crew enjoying the early morning trip will soon be fighting for their lives. It's a clear, sunny morning on board a passenger train in Western Canada. Breakfast is being served as the train rolls east through the Canadian Rockies. Just 15 kilometers away, an 11 million kilo freight train, CN 413, rumbles down the track towards it. With diesel engines still pounding at full throttle, it's pulling 113 rail cars of grain and hazardous material. From the outside, everything looks normal. But what's going on inside the lead engine of 413 is about to become one of the greatest mysteries in Canadian railroad history. Freight trains and passenger trains often travel on the same track. For short sections, the track splits, so trains heading in opposite directions can pass safely. Today, 413 is on the upper branch. Signals tell the freight train to slow, then stop completely. The signals will only turn green again once the passenger train has passed safely by below. Then the freight train can rejoin the main line. But 413 isn't slowing down. It's now heading downhill and it charges through the warning lights. If it doesn't stop soon, it will return to the main line at full speed, straight into the path of the passenger train. Unaware of the bizarre behavior of 413, the passenger train continues east. Martin Pedersen gets his breakfast.
Hi.
The freighter thunders through the last set of light signals, ignoring 3 red lights that command it to stop. It slams back onto the main line. It's traveling 95 kilometers an hour and weighs more than 11 million kilos. And still it doesn't slow down. Herbert Timpey sits to relax. Ken Cuttle has a clear view of the railway ahead.
I got in conversation with an English guy, and he had his back to the front, and I was looking over his shoulder forward the way the train was going. There was a flickering light in the distance. And not knowing the track layout, I thought, oh, there must be another line, and if it's another train, it's going to go past us, you know?
Just I was reading the pocket novel, one of the girls from the partier group happened to just walk past me.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
And then, boom.
The trains collide like two charging rams at a combined speed of nearly 200 kilometers per hour. Passengers are rocked by one collision after another as 70 freight cars pile into the wreckage.
Like an incoming wave, grain cars, long pipes 3 foot in diameter, 30 feet in length, you name it. And these were flying through the air like toys.
Thrown from the tracks by the force of the collision, one freight car flies through the air, smashing to a stop on the Via train.
The whole world seemed to explode.
It was like a mini atom bomb. It was a big mushroom of black smoke.
Then, everything was dark. They could no longer breathe because everything was filled with smoke. Oh, I'm gonna die. And the third thing that happened was I just resigned myself to that.
I've been working about 37 years and on the railroad, and I never seen anything so bad.
The wave of metal, grain cars, stopped just where the dome car was. If it had gone another 30 feet, it would have covered us as well.
In the same car, one deck below, Martin Pedersen struggles to escape. But he can barely see what's happening in front of him. The window beside him shattered during impact, filling his eyes with broken glass. Almost 2 kilometers behind the engine, the caboose of train 413 finally lurches to a stop. Conductor Wayne Smith sees a ball of fire glowing in the distance, but he has no idea how bad the situation is.
Front end 413. I think we're in the bush or we're derailed. There is a big explosion up here, and we have chemicals on the train, so stay away from it. Stay away from the dangerous goods.
But all Smith gets in reply is an ominous silence. Passengers continue to struggle to escape the mangled wreck of their train as the smoke thickens.
I was trained well in the Royal Marines to survive and to act spontaneously. There was a window at the back of the dome car, and it was all cracked, and I just jumped up on the seat, smashed my head through the glass roof, and shouted, "Come on, let's get out."
Cuttle and others jump from the car.
And I looked back, and all of a sudden it ignited. Woof!
Down below in the lounge car, Martin Pedersen also manages to escape. But others aren't so lucky. Many are still trapped in the burning cars, including passenger Jamie Haight.
The roof of the coach had been crunched down. I mean, I'd lost my glasses. I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe. And here it was the porter that had been behind the snack bar, had opened up this exit way, and he had vamoosed out through it, and I took off out behind it too.
Step bottom.
He was in shock.
Hey,
Snap out of it.
Hey, buddy, pull it together here. You know, there's people in here and we got to do something about it, but...
Half blind without his glasses, Haight goes back inside, trying to help others out of the wreck.
413 here, dispatcher.
Back in the caboose, Smith is talking to the freight train's dispatcher, some 285 kilometers away in Edmonton.
Everything in the air.
We're gonna get a doctor out here and some ambulances.
Herb Timpey, the assistant conductor on the passenger train, can hear the conversation on his radio and breaks in.
Passenger coaches all over the ditch.
And get an ambulance.
And there's a whole bunch of cars on fire. You get that, dispatcher?
We need the fire department here very badly. Some coaches are trapped with passengers inside. They're burning. I don't think the engineers lived through this one. It's a real mess.
Okay, that's right on the switch at Dalehurst, eh?
Yes, I'm gonna walk up there and see if I can be of any assistance.
What was the signal at Dalehurst when your head end called it?
Pardon me?
What was that signal on that signal at Dalehurst?
Well, I was calling him for the signal at Dalehurst quite a few times, but I kept calling him and there was no answer.
Well, it should have been red on the panel.
Well, he must have ran it then, dispatcher, because I could not get a hold of him. I tried and I tried.
Okay, all right.
Back at the head of the passenger train, Jamie Haight tries to save who he can.
Are you okay? I'm gonna help you.
Haight can hear the screams of men and women trapped in the flames.
And I can hear the women that I had dinner with the night before screaming, you know, to save her baby.
Haight was not able to save the mother and her child. They're out of reach under debris.
That was difficult.
People who were trapped and couldn't get out, screaming like you've never heard. One guy knew that his wife was trapped and he went back in and died with her. Another woman in the carriage under where we were had most of her leg cut off.
James Haight courageously decides to go back inside. The fire is a scorching 660 degrees, but Haight tries to save one more life.
But there was a chap right in front of me there, and it was the chap I had had dinner with the night before. And all of a sudden the flames came and consumed him. He just sat up and rubbed his head, and because there's nothing more we could do for him. Anybody in front of me in that coach was dead. For whatever the reasons, it wasn't my time to go then, for whatever the reasons.
Wayne Smith is devastated. He can't reach his two friends at the front of the freight train, and he can't understand what happened to cause such an enormous disaster. In Western Canada, a freight train has smashed head-on into a passenger train carrying more than 100 people. In the minutes after the collision, survivors are dragging themselves from the burning wreckage, while others are still trapped inside.
One of the girls that had been in the car in the morning, and I looked at her and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to tell you,
He had no choice but to tell her what happened to her friend in the train.
Your friend was in the car here."
She died, trapped in the burning debris.
I felt like the worst person in the world, because I had to tell her. If I could have taken back that 1 second in time to not tell her, you know.
Royal Canadian Mounted Police Constable Mark Linnell is one of the first to arrive on the scene.
I was told there was a train derailment, not a train crash. I mean, there's a double whammy.
The RCMP officer came. He could hardly speak. His mouth dropped open, and he said, "I can't believe what I'm witnessing."
It's a horrifying scene. Pictures taken shortly after the crash show utter devastation.
I mean, I was just flabbergasted. I just couldn't believe it. And instant. That's quite the thing to see.
The collision is 18 kilometers from the town of Hinton. It takes emergency crews some 45 minutes to get there.
I was in the Marines in England for 14 years, and I'd seen a lot of disasters, man-made disasters, terrorist bombs. And I thought I'd seen it all. There was a lot of blunt force trauma, of course, flying glass, burns. And then I saw what appeared to be two bodies in the restaurant car hugging each other. So we found out later that was a man and wife. And this was one heck of a shock.
As Linnell is escorting survivors away from the site, he sees a lone man with a radio coming down the track.
How's the front end doing? What's your name?
Smith is about to learn that his colleagues aboard his train are dead.
Like, what happened? Like, did they make contact with the...
We're still under investigation, and there's not a lot I can tell you right now.
Okay, so they still might be... I mean...
I'm really sorry.
He'd be distraught and shaken, and yes, his train is wrecked, and all these people dead.
The Hinton train disaster is the worst railway accident to strike Canada in 35 years. More than $30 million in property are destroyed. 23 people are dead, and 71 others are severely injured. Wayne Smith is the only surviving crew member of the CN train, the only man who may be able to explain how an 11 million kilo freighter plowed headfirst into an oncoming passenger train. What he knows could be critical to unraveling the cause of the disaster. 2 days after the collision, the Alberta government establishes an official commission of inquiry, and the Honourable Mr. Justice Rene P. Foisy leads the investigation. Judge Foisy is a justice of the Alberta Court of Appeal.
It was reasonably simple. I mean, what caused the accident? But it turned out to be a lot more complicated than that because there were no easy answers as to what caused the accident.
Freight and passenger trains routinely use the same tracks without incident. What was different this time? Over the next 11 months, Foisy calls on 150 witnesses and specialists to help him find out.
I think what has most surprised me is the complex procedures, the equipment, the overall complexity that we have to look at in running a railroad and what goes on in running a railroad.
While Conductor Smith recovers from the accident, Foisy gets to work. He begins by studying the signals that should have told the freight train to stop. If they weren't working, the crew on 413 may not have thought they needed to slow down.
CN did a very in-depth test on the signal system, and it was determined that it was performing properly. We went further. We hired our own independent experts to test the system.
The switches which operate the signal lights were frozen in position after the accident. Electrical engineer Eugene Couch was hired to read them. Perhaps a mechanical fault in the system had turned them green. telling the freight train to speed through.
A fault does not give a positive green light to any situation. So if there was a fault in any control part of the system, it would have forced everything to go to red, which meant the passenger train would have stopped and would have forced the freight train to stop.
If a mechanical problem wasn't the cause, there was a more chilling possibility. Perhaps someone set the freight train lights to green on purpose, causing the two trains to collide. Couch dismissed that idea too.
To do that would mean that somebody would have to actually go there and really maliciously, change things. And there was no sign of any tampering on any mechanisms. Basically, our conclusion, we felt that the system was sound and was safe.
Foisey believes the lights were red, but the freight train ignored them. Perhaps another mechanical fault was behind the crash.
Well, I was calling him for the signal at Dalehurst Court.
In his statement after the crash, Conductor Wayne Smith told Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers that something was wrong with his radio that morning.
Because I could not get a hold of him. I tried and I tried.
Maybe the front of the train was having mechanical problems, but they weren't able to get in contact with Smith. Joseph Hebert examines the portable radios the crew used.
The first test was with the radio that was on the train that was in the accident at Hinton. The radio performed to specification.
But even if the radios themselves were working, there could be another problem. Many CN employees claim there are places along the tracks where radio communication is impossible, so-called dead spots.
And it's not a dead spot that's there 365 days out of the year.
The possibility was also examined and dismissed.
Sometimes you can't. Some radios are stronger, some are weaker.
The second test done as far as communications between the locomotive and the caboose was done with the same type of radio as was used at the time the accident took place. A field test with that type of radio had satisfactory performance.
The evidence was pretty clear, and we concluded that there were no dead spots.
One other possible explanation is examined. Natural phenomena, like the Northern Lights, can also affect radio performance.
Got a measure and medicine line.
Northern Lights can build up very high currents and communications lines. Anything even hooked up to a radio could pick it up. My determination of it was that they were not a factor.
If the signals were red and the radios were working, why had the train crashed? Foisey examines an ingenious piece of technology, the hotbox detector. Sitting beside the track, hotboxes monitor the temperature of a train's wheels and axles. They also record the speed of trains as they roar by. When Foisey and his advisors examine the hotbox data, they make a telling discovery. When the front of the freight train passed the hotbox detector just after Hargwin, it was traveling a little over 60 kilometers an hour. But by the time the caboose passed it, the train was going more than 74 kilometers an hour. Despite the signals telling it to slow down, the train was speeding up.
For the last 5 miles, we were able to determine that the freight train was going at least 59 miles an hour, perhaps as high as 60 or 61. There were no brake applications before the crash as well.
The crew let the train travel too fast. They did not heed signals to stop, and they never applied the brakes. It all points to a train that was out of control.
Why there were no brake applications is difficult to understand.
With mechanical problems ruled out, Foisey begins to examine the crew of the freight train. Perhaps there's something about engineer Jack Hudson, who was in charge of the train, that could explain what happened that day. As Foisey begins sifting through Hudson's medical records and interviewing his family, he makes a disturbing discovery. A train collision in Western Canada has killed 23 people. Another 71 are injured. The man leading the inquiry into the disaster has ruled out mechanical problems. Judge Rene Foisey now takes a closer look at Jack Hudson, the 16-year veteran who was driving the freight train. When Foisey and the Commission review Hudson's medical files, they're shocked by what they discover.
Mr. Hudson was a man who was sick. He was an alcoholic. He had high blood pressure, which was problematic. He had diabetes. He had a pancreatic attack the summer before this accident. He had to wear a colostomy for a number of months.
Foisey wonders if this long list of illnesses could somehow have led to the train crash.
The engineer, Jack Hudson, had been killed outright in the crash and had severe injuries. So we couldn't determine whether there'd been a catastrophic medical event, whether he'd had a heart attack, for example, or a stroke, which had incapacitated him. But we were able to do toxicology, and there was no alcohol or drugs present.
He did have a lot of health problems, and he had some problems at home. These problems at home appeared to be on the mend, and that he was not the kind of man who, if he was going to commit suicide, would take 23 people with him and injure another 70, some of them very, very seriously. So we discounted that possibility of a suicide.
If it wasn't suicide, if Hudson did have a stroke or heart attack at the controls, why didn't his brakeman, Mark Edwards, take any action? Investigators come up with one plausible answer.
Did you get some rest?
Not much. Got a touch of the flu. Could use a full night's sleep.
Perhaps Edwards had been asleep on the job. Dr. Alison Smiley is an expert on sleep and fatigue.
Jack Hudson, he had at the very most, before he went on duty that day, 3.5 hours of sleep. And that is if he slept from the last moment somebody saw him till the moment somebody next saw him again, 3.5 hours. Brakeman said he had a touch of the flu and he'd had 5 hours sleep the night before. Wayne Smith similarly had insufficient sleep, about 5 hours before the collision.
As the freight train passed the signals telling it to stop, the entire crew may have been fast asleep.
You could work at any time of the day. So one day you might start at 4 o'clock in the morning, the next day you start at 2 in the afternoon. Their hours were so erratic, they were continually in a jet lag state because their physiology was never sort of fully adjusted to any particular working hours.
When it comes to staying alert, train engineers face many challenges, including long rides up and down the same stretch of track.
The tracks going by one after the other, it's a very soporific situation to work in, and easy to see how somebody, no matter how motivated, could fall asleep.
At the time, trains were equipped with safety devices that would automatically stop a train if the engine man died or fell asleep, the so-called dead man's pedal.
Basically, the engineer is supposed to keep his foot on the pedal, and while his foot is on the pedal, the train won't stop. If that pedal isn't depressed, then it will, after a number of seconds, give a warning, which is quite audible. And if nothing happens, then it will stop the train.
But Foisey discovers that for many trainmen, disabling the dead man's pedal is standard practice.
One of the excuses that was given by the engineers is that to go long distances, having to keep your foot on that pedal was very uncomfortable. And so that they would sometimes put something on the pedal, a lunchbox or something heavy enough to keep it depressed so that they could stretch their legs. Unfortunately, what was happening, this pedal was being depressed for long, long periods of time.
But even if Edwards and Hudson had fallen asleep at the front of the train, and the dead man's pedal was rigged, conductor Wayne Smith at the back could still have prevented the disaster. Almost 2 months into the Foisey inquiry, Smith takes the stand. Doctors had kept him from testifying earlier, saying he was too traumatized by the accident. Now, for the first time, investigators will hear Smith reconstruct events on board his train in the moments leading up to the disaster.
I was sitting looking out the back of the train from my desk when we passed mile board 169. That's the landmark that I used to initiate a call to the engineer to ask for the display at the Dalehurst approach signal. Head end of 413, what indication do you have at the Dalehurst approach signal 1703, over?
The front end of the train is supposed to respond, letting Smith know that they've seen the signal lights telling them to slow down.
Head of 413, can you hear me, over? I probably called him 3 or 4 times. I didn't get a response on my gray radio. There was something wrong with it.
What's the indication at signal 1703, over?
It's a surprising piece of testimony. Foisey already knows the radios were working fine. When Smith is asked how fast he thought the train was going before the collision, Foisey gets another surprise.
I felt the front end give a light brake application on the caboose. Coming around the curve, I felt we were doing a track speed of about 50 miles an hour or less.
But according to the hotbox detectors, the train was traveling almost 16 kilometers an hour over track speed, and there was never any application of the brakes.
I went to my red radio, and I tried to get a hold of him on it.
Jack, how's the Dalehurst approach signal 1703?
I was calling him on channel 1 3 or 4 times, and there was no answer, so I tried to get a hold of him on different channels.
But once again, Smith's testimony doesn't add up. Foisey has heard from other trainmen who were monitoring their radios in the area that day. No one heard Smith call. Smith says he was still trying to contact Hudson when the end of the train raced past signals telling it to slow down.
Jack!
As an experienced trainman, Smith knows that the next set of lights will likely be a triple red, telling the train to stop. He was getting no answer, and the train wasn't slowing down. An emergency brake cord was in easy reach, but Smith never pulled it.
Jack, are you there?
With Hudson mysteriously silent, Smith says he does nothing, but continue to call the front end.
Front end, Jack, come in.
Why, in the circumstances that you've described, did you not pull the brake?
I felt the engineer had the train under control. I felt he, in fact, was doing what was necessary to control the train at that point. I never felt at any point in time that I should pull the emergency brake. At that time, I didn't think that anything was wrong.
That's the point I make, Mr. Smith, that when there's a problem with the radio, you've been trained over the years to observe the signals.
And it would have been the last thing I would have done.
He didn't pull the brake, he didn't pull the air because he felt that it hadn't reached that point. Basically, that was his evidence, and I had a lot of difficulty with that because if that point hadn't been reached, when was it going to be reached, if ever?
Smith's contradictory testimony is complete. Judge Foisey is now ready to close his case and lay the blame on those responsible for the disaster. The inquiry into one of the deadliest train crashes in Canada is complete. 23 people were killed when a freight train crashed head-on into a passenger train near Hinton, Alberta. Chief Investigator Renee Foisey has explored every angle, from technical malfunction to human error. He's now ready to deliver his report on what went wrong that day. In his 205-page report, Foisey parcels out the blame, naming all the key offenders. Foisey writes that the train's engineer, Jack Hudson, failed to observe and obey light signals, commanding him to stop his train before it entered the single track. If Hudson was unable to do his job, brakeman Mark Edwards failed to intervene. He also ignored the light signals and didn't brake the train before it entered the single track. Conductor Wayne Smith was guilty too. He had failed to follow operating rules and pull the emergency brake when he couldn't contact the 2 men at the front of the train. In a statement to police, he had even suggested that he thought they were sleeping.
Said that my head end was asleep.
Do you recall making that response, sir?
Yes, I do.
With so many contradictions in his testimony, Foisey rules that the conductor's evidence is unreliable.
I wasn't sure what had happened, and I went to my back desk. I jumped on from the cupola and ran for. It seemed like we were just keeping going. There was no immediate stopping. The caboose kept sliding.
Instead, Foisey emphasizes that Smith, like Edwards and Hudson, was dangerously tired that morning.
I just wanted to get home, actually, at the time.
But the crew aren't the only ones Foisey blames for the accident. According to the Foisey report, Jack Hudson may well have had a stroke or heart attack before the collision. But CN management had known about Hudson's medical record for years.
He managed to accumulate, I think it was 40 or 50 demerits, and at 60, you're fired. But after he got to that level, there were some other infractions which weren't recorded.
Foisey also calls attention to the rules that were routinely ignored, such as rigging the dead man's pedal and taking the train on the fly.
The conclusion we came to is that there was a lot to be desired on the part of CN, and that, yes, there was certainly some laxness and some complacency when it came to these areas.
I'll get a measure at Medicine Lodge here. I haven't had a chance yet.
Oh, that's, you got pretty well grain cars, eh?
Yeah, I think so.
There is a lesson to be learned here. It's that when you have rules, you obey the rules and you enforce the rules. If it becomes too much of a fraternity and of a buddy-buddy system, it gets lax. And problems occur, and this tragedy was one of them.
Foisey demands that CN improve its safety equipment, recommending that all trains be equipped with reset safety control technology. These systems are much more complicated than a dead man's pedal. If constant attention is not paid to the train, alarms sound and the train eventually shuts down. It's equipment which has proved valuable several times since the disaster.
There was a study done with CN 10 years after this accident. They found something like 90% of the train engineers saying that they had been woken by the alerting device at least once.
In response to Foisey's report, CN Rail creates one of the most sophisticated fatigue countermeasures programs in the world. Trainmen are no longer on call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Napping is no longer frowned upon. Rest houses have been created and improved, and locomotive cabs made more comfortable. For the victims of the Hinton disaster of 1986, changes to Canadian railroading come too late.
I still remember the people that were killed in the accident and good friends I had on the railroad. And that's really, it does bother me.
It's 20 years nearly. And I'm still going strong. Very lucky.
I don't equate it to luck, no. No, too much of a tragedy to think about luck. There's too much hurt that happened inside of me. It took me quite a while to rebuild my sanity again.
I got over it fairly quickly and got on with their life. There may be lots of other people who weren't as lucky.
You can be going along in life, and then something can come along and just kind of destroy your very foundation or shatter your very foundation. And through no fault of your own. But life has a habit of doing that. But the other thing I can share with them is that you can recover from it. There is a tomorrow.